But Erik, I've read your book. I've listened to your podcast. I've obviously met you in person. I've talked to you several times. And the more I talk to you, the more I learn about the depth of your backstory and kind of how it led to everything else. And so that's why I wanted to expose that to the people here, because I think there's a lot to be learned from your story. And that's kind of the quest that you're on now, is mental health. Yes, that's part of it, but there's also a law component, and we'll talk about those things as we go on. That's why I want to do a few parts. But what was increasingly apparent to me, and the podcast actually was the thing that, even though you didn't talk about your the youth portion of your life very much on the podcast, that was the part that kind of illuminated the connection between your because we all have our youth is what forms us, and then we have these tendencies as we get later in life, and then we have to enhance some things and tamp down other things. But the thing, so I was obviously in intelligence for my background. That's a very transient career. There's a lot of moving around in that. And the thing that stuck out to me about your early life is for a child that didn't have the parents necessarily moving around, it seemed like the beginning period of your life was defined by moving, but it was less because of a parent's job and career, and more for essentially to position you in youth sports. Do I kind of have that right?
That's a very accurate, I think, summation. So yeah, we never moved physically. Our residence, I shouldn't say that. I started out, we were in an apartment in North Hollywood, and when I think I was about 8 or 9 years old, we moved to Canoga Park into a house. And but I moved in there, I think I was in 5th grade. So back then, elementary school ended in 6th grade. So once I was done in 6th grade, I never went to the local school a day in my life. So I went to back then, for 7th and 8th grade, I went to a private school, probably about, at least drive-wise 30 minutes away. And then went to another, for the first semester of my 9th grade year, I went to a place called Valley Christian, that school's not even there anymore. And then in 7th and 8th grade, then for the second half of 9th grade, I went to St. Genevieve, which is a Catholic school, also about 30 or so minutes away, and then ultimately graduated from Burroughs High School, which was even further away. And and it was none of it was for anything other than to play sports. And I think that probably resonates with a lot of folks because so many parents, I think, live vicariously through their kids on some level. And in this case, that was my situation with my dad.
That was the juxtaposition that was interesting to me, because that's why I kind of set it up as normally it's the parent that drives that, because I'm used to military families, government families that, okay, we get an assignment overseas, so we've got to move. But this is more, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think your dad kind of more was on the odd jobs path. He didn't necessarily have a lot of consistent employment. So then he kind of it was like that made him delve into your potential a little bit more, which I would assume you felt a lot of pressure as a result. I don't know if you did as a kid, because maybe it was hard to notice all of the dynamics, because we always have a smaller scope when we're kids, and then it widens.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. While my childhood, as you mentioned, was going on, I didn't have the perspective that I have today. And looking back on it, that's when everything becomes clear. It's like, why would you do that? But during the time of it, I don't think it was necessarily. It wasn't something I would do with my kids. In fact, I didn't. And so, yeah. And my dad had his reasons, and we could get into that if you like. But anyway, like you said, it's not really something while it was going on that seemed out of place to me. But I will tell you that every time I did change schools, it was starting all over again. Just getting friends and that sort of thing.
I am curious about kind of those reasons, both sides of that, the reasons that he was doing that, and then the other side, because I think that helped form a lot of things for you, that transient nature. It's hard to kind of make friends and start over. You become better at that overall. Then you can go to a new town, and I guess it was applicable once you got to your career, because you moved teams several times, and you were probably used to that because of your youth. But as a younger person, that's got to be tough. So I'm curious about the reasons, and then kind of how you felt about the moving as a young person, because you go to a new school, and like you said, you don't, your best friend isn't there anymore. Your whoever you knew, your teachers, you got to relearn everything. And that's hard for an adult, let alone a kid.
Right. And as you're talking right now, I'm thinking, so there was never a time when I got to say goodbye to anybody. It was just, I'm here one day, gone the next, and now I'm on to something new. And again, that's, I think everybody can see at this point anyway, that's, probably not the way to go in terms of, bringing some stability to a person's initial years of their life. But like I said, it's easy to see that in the rearview mirror at the time. And I don't even think my dad had that perspective, honestly. Unfortunately, I should, for him as a dad.
Well, so I'm curious. You're talking about how you didn't move much. Was there? I know you were moving schools. I was trying to look at this in the book, and you talked about it a little bit in the podcast, but was the impetus that he thought there were better opportunities? Because you started in baseball, where that was more, I think, kind of the drive, right? And then you moved into football. So it was more about where the athletic opportunities were, not necessarily, hey, I like this sport. Hey, I'm enjoying playing with my friends, because those weren't things for you. You didn't get to play with the same people. You didn't get to play the same sport. You just moved around and even lived, I think, did you live with a family friend at one point?
I did. Yeah, that was my last year in high school, last year and a half, I guess. And so it, I like I said, and like we've been talking about here, to me, if I had it to do all over again, if I was in charge, I would have just stayed at one school, and I would have gone to the local school, whatever it was, middle school, high school, and been done with it. So, because I think there's plenty of opportunity right in your own backyard as well. So.
Oh, exactly. Yeah, and you were in a good area for sports, I would think. I've never lived in that area, obviously, and I am not familiar with it. But from what I've read from your book and other things, it seems like that was a decent area to do it. But it also seemed like he was trying to put you kind of against the right competition to a degree. You even moved to different religious schools and things, because my nephew plays for a Catholic school here, and I've kind of seen that where it's like he doesn't have a conference. He has to go 2 hours away to even play another team that's in his conference, and that's modern day here. So I can only imagine what that looked like that day. And then that's another bigger change for you, because now you're adding in the religious element from the schooling standpoint, and the conferences are way different. It's not like you're just bouncing from rival to rival within an established conference there.
Right. The first time I was ever in a church was when I was at St. Genevieve, and we had religion was a class you had to take, and so I was literally making it up as I went along, And so, but on the flip side on the flip side of my dad, I'll say this. He was searching, I think, for his own identity, because he, as a young boy, around the age of 1.5 or 2, his own mother abandoned him. And then he didn't even grow up with his dad. His dad shipped him off to be brought up by my dad's aunt's family. So my grandpa's sister. And so, and I think it was in high school when my dad came back. In high school back in those days started in 10th grade. And by that time, my grandpa was on his 4th wife. And so it was, tough for kids to, I think, grow up in that sort of environment. And so, I can't say that I really fault him at all. I really don't. And there's one thing I will say about my dad, and that is that no matter what the situation, he believed in me when nobody else did. And when I say nobody, I mean nobody. And so I don't think I would have ever got as far as I did without my dad or my mom, really. And so even though growing up, I wasn't close with either one of them.
That was a part of your story that kind of came together for me a little bit more as I've gotten to know you better, because that happens, I think, to a lot of people, where they obviously our parents are hugely impactful on us, but in different ways. Sometimes it helps us drive to a certain place where the difficult circumstances of a childhood help to engage you in some sort of drive that gets you further. Sometimes sometimes the lack of opportunities limit you. Obviously, if you have kind of a loving family where it's kind of like the old sitcoms and all of that, then that's a different scenario. But there's so much of the butterfly effect that's involved here. But that's why I wanted to kind of set the table a little bit, because it is connected, I think, later on, and you were able to come to terms with a lot of things, I think, as you got older. So we can cover that some now, but we'll come back to that. But I wanted to talk about your mom a little bit too, because I didn't want to leave her out of the discussion. She seemed like the difference here was, I think, since your dad was more focused on maybe your side of things and kind of what you guys had going there, she had to kind of keep everything else running in the family, it seemed.
Yeah, I think, this is all conjecture on my part. But I really think, my mom, she went to work right out of high school. And she was a secretary. And later in life, after she had a couple kids, me and my sister, and we're 6.5 years apart. After she had Kelly and I, she went back to school, and she wanted to be a teacher. A PE teacher, and she, made the dean's list every year. She started out at Pierce College, which is where I went. And then ended up graduating from Cal State Northridge, and with a degree in physical education. And I think there's 2 reasons why she never left. And one was that, as you had alluded to before, I think there were times in my life where my dad didn't have a job. And so she couldn't go that route because teachers didn't make enough money. And she was also very loyal to her boss, because he's the only person she's ever worked for, and he was an engineer and aerospace engineer. And so, I think she had it I have a lot of respect for her. Both my parents are passed away now, but I think I respect my mom in ways that I never did before growing up. It's not that she made it easy for me, because she didn't have a lot of affection for my dad, but I think that I think she had a lot of pressure on her, and that came out, right? So it came out towards me at times, and so that's one of the things that one of the it's like when I was mentioning before, I wasn't close with their parent. It was more on my mom's side because of what sort of I could tell I, in some way, graded on her, and just by my sheer presence. And then with my dad, I didn't really respect him, and that was why. I think I felt the pressure of my dad living through me. I felt the pressure, not pressure of my mom, but just like she didn't come across very warm and fuzzy, at least not to me. And so that's kind of, throughout, those were hard obstacles to get over.
Definitely, especially because you don't have the perspective that you got later. You don't understand the pressure that's being put on her. You don't understand maybe that some of that is a little bit of, hey, she has certain feelings towards your dad, and so maybe some of those are inadvertently then put on you because of the familial ties and resemblance, and so that's something that we all learn more about our parents as we get older, because we get a different perspective of, oh, this is what they were dealing with, because they can't ever be dealing with anything because they've always got to be dealing with the kids.
Well, and all the other umpteen things that are going on in life. Exactly. So it does make it, when I'm a young kid or even a teenager, I don't have that perspective. I do now. I'm 61 years old now, and obviously when I was later in life, that was different. But now I think, in hindsight, for sure, I respect them both in ways that I never did, I think, while they were both alive. At least, let me say this about my mom. She got sick with uterine cancer. She found out she had stage 4 uterine cancer the day after Mother's Day in 2011. And that was a real, what do you do with that? And I think that year, really, that last year of her life, I think really showed who she really was. And all of her guards really were let down. I spent a lot of time with her then. And I'm grateful for that time we had together. She would have chemo treatments at the hospital where I would take her and stay overnight. And they don't, as bad as the hospital beds are, they don't have much. I think it was a fold-out chair I had that turned into something I could lay on. But my point is that we grew a lot closer during that time. And unfortunately, that time did end, though.
I'm glad you did get that time before it did. It always ends too quickly, but I think this is kind of a good setup for what we for a good groundwork that we've laid here, because it's such a layered story, and I appreciate you going in depth about your parents and all of that, because that comes back in the story. We'll probably put a pause in it for now because we've got to get you out of here, but I want to return to it, and then we'll probably hit your college and NFL career next, and then that'll probably take up one full interview slot and then get to the post stuff, because that's where a lot of this stuff comes together. I know you have a lot of thoughts and things that you want to talk about for the post-career stuff, because that's where a lot of your current mission and messaging comes from. But really appreciate you kicking this off with us. This was definitely a perfect choice and a perfect start to it. So appreciate you being vulnerable and talking about this stuff with us. But I want to make sure to plug the book and the podcast so people can kind of work along with us here. You got to pick up his book. You got to listen to the podcast, because that'll help with a lot of this information that we're talking about here.
Well, I really appreciate that, Ryan. And as you mentioned before, the name of the book is The Ultimate Comeback. It can be picked up on Amazon. I'm about to upload the audio version here shortly, and then the podcast as well. It's concluded. So it's anywhere you find your podcast, you can listen to The Quarterback and the Con Artist. And I really appreciate your time, and a lot of the stuff that we are talking about, in fact, is in the book and in the podcast. So, but there's actually more than what we're talking about, at least so far. So definitely. I really appreciate this time.
I appreciate your time, and that's why I thought we should stretch out a little bit, because there is so many layers to this, and wanted to give it due time to be able to air out. You've got a great message, great mission, and so I wanted to make sure to allocate the proper amount of time. So I appreciate it. We'll be having Erik back for part 2 of this. I'll announce the time when we're able to set something up with him, but really appreciate you joining the show, Erik, and we'll look forward to continuing this with you soon.